One thing I always say, and especially to my daughter and my wife, is assume, A-S-S-U-M-E, which stands for when we assume makes an ass of you and me, right? Assume, A-S-S-U-M-E.
100%.
Throwing a little dad joke in there. So easy to assume because, it's, again, going back, it's so easy to just blame all the events, people. It's so much harder to look at the truth because in order to look at the truth, you got to look at multifaceted. You got to look at different perspective, your perspective, your father's perspective, your mom's perspective. And it's so hard to do that. And if you don't have the wisdom to do that, so it's easy to just start pointing fingers. You mentioned about age 21. What was the catalyst for you to decide, like, I don't want to blame my father anymore. I want to go reach out to him and see, I want to reconnect with him. What was that? What made you want to reach out to him?
Honestly, I ended up making the call on a whim. He had, at that point, we were out of touch for a couple of years. And I remember I had his old workplace. He used to work at a certain dealer in California. And I had called and they were like, oh no, he's no longer with us. And I was like, okay. And it just kind of burst something in me where it was just like, maybe you should just look for him. You don't have to necessarily contact him, but like if you know where he's at least you feel a little bit better. Lo and behold, one day I just literally found the dealer that he bought, gave it a call, and lo and behold, he was the person who answered. And I was just like, hey, I'm looking for such and such. Does he work here? And he was like, yeah. And I could tell at that point he was definitely caught off guard by who was calling him. And the context of that conversation really ended up being a very quick, short 5-minute conversation to which he ended it with, I will call you back. And mind you, I already had these stories of unreliability and abandonment. And I was like, okay. He took down my number. He said he'll call me back. He's not calling me back. And I already had this like in my head. I was sure that I was going to be right. And about 15-20 minutes goes by and I get another call back. At that point, he had actually apologized in that phone call and it caught me off guard, but at the same time there was still instances after that specific call where I would be like, you don't own up to what you've done. Get so hung up on it. And it was maybe that he was not showing up in the way that I would have liked for the ideal version of him to show up. And I think that brings me to another point of sometimes in relationships it's so easy to project what you want, and if you're not communicating what you want and you get disappointed by that person, it can be a very balance of your teeter-tottering your expectations with who that person is, not realizing that that person doesn't even know that that's what you want out of that relationship. So it was an interesting dynamic we had going on for a while. But the main catalyst for that was just I had this thought in the back of my mind of one of these days I may want to reach out to him, and I would hate to be the person who calls him or looks for him at that point and finds out, oh, he's already passed away. And I was like, either I can hold on to this, not contact him. And there was an odd part of it where I just, even knowing how to find him brought some sort of comfort. Ironically enough, his name is a actual name that is common within the Egyptian community. So had I really been looking for him without little like give points, I was not even 100% sure I would have found him unless I hired someone extreme like a private investigator at that stage. For me, it was very much, I had that thought in my back of my mind. And then 21, you're starting to think about dating. And even though at that point I was still not ready to date, I was beginning to start the process of working on the person I want to be in a relationship and kind of setting out these overarching life goals. And I knew that so long as I stay angry at him or creating these stories, that relationship dynamic of abandonment, of feeling like I'm not good enough for a person, was going to carry on into these relationships. And that would be the dynamic I would receive back because of what I was already naturally evoking.
I think you hit our conversation today because a lot of people were like saying, I don't want to forget my parents, right? And what they don't realize is that at a deeper level, when I say deeper level, there's conscious level and there's subconscious level. These things gets triggered like without us even knowing because it happens so fast we don't think about it. Just like exactly what you said, when we get into a partnership relationship, if at any time our partner, we feel like they abandoned us because they didn't follow our rules, our guidelines, and our expectations, and they leave, then we go back into that trauma. But our brain happens so fast, we're like, oh, it's that guy. But what we don't know is actually at a deeper level, it actually triggered that abandonment from your dad. If you guys are listening to this, I hope you guys are getting this is really deep psychology stuff. I'm so glad that you're bringing this point up. This is a lot of work, Anita. This is what I do, is figuring out what was the story in the past as we uncover the layers of onions and get to the root cause. Because if you don't find the root cause, you're not going to be able to heal. You're not going to be able to forgive, and you're going to see that same wound happening over and over and over and over with other men.
100%. And I did not want to have a slew of sleaze bags that I was attracting, but I knew at that state that, just being very honest here, I had already done the research of the statistics that come along with being raised the way I was raised in a single parent household. So it's like, you drop out of college, you're likely to end up pregnant by a certain age, you're likely to not have a relationship that's basically going to last, or you're not likely to be financially successful, the drugs, the alcohol, you name it. So I was just like, I am going to do the work to not end up a statistic.
That's interesting you mentioned that too, because if you look at it, it's really profound, because these women, and it goes for men too, right? So these women who are battered or abused or have abandonment issue, you know, they get into a relationship. In the beginning of the relationship, they're all lovey-dovey. This is really handsome guy. This is my perfect guy. I'm going to marry him. And all of a sudden, he starts drinking. He starts beating up the woman. And we're like, if you already knew that ahead of time, why would you want to date this guy? But it's the internal work that you haven't worked on that you realize, the subconscious part. Until that happens, you're going to be dating these not so great candidates. This is beautiful. I love our conversation is going. Speaking of which, talking to your father, you know, obviously you had your rules too. And then oftentimes you feel like he's a flake. He owns his own dealership, right? He's not busy. He's got 24 hours out of the day doing nothing, right? He's not talking to customers, not trying to sell cars. Like, he's not busy at all, right? So he has all the time in the world for you. So how did you guys bridge that gap and mend that relationship?
Quite honestly, I started kind of giving him a tidbit of what I was expecting, because at the end of the day, I was not expecting him to be on the phone with me all day, every day. That's absurd. But what I was expecting is more so, if you say you're gonna do something, follow through on that. And if you can't, at least communicate it so I don't create these stories in my head. And just laying out that expectation helped us kind of bridge it. And I'm not saying that he's been perfect, but now I've learned that eventually, if it's not that day, 2 days later, I will get the explanation. And so I've been able to release that, versus he's not communicating. I'm starting to build up these stories in my head. And for me, communication is so key, because it alleviates half the back and forth of what you can come up with. Because there's a difference when it comes to, hey, I'm busy, or I had a really long day at work, to I'm just blowing you up. And so with the more open communication, we were able to heal. But also, I think I was just starting to realize that there's aspects of his personality that were not going to change. And so I would also start kind of getting cued into, if I call him, I can tell that he's having a stressful day, or he's sick, or he's tired. And those are triggers for, I'm not in the most communicative mood. And again, being a salesman at his dealer as well, he was very much involved with talking to people all day. And as much as an extrovert he is, we all hit a wall at a certain point, and it comes to a point where I cannot communicate anymore. And I started to understand that more. And so it was just a little bit of understanding on my part, but also communicating my needs. And that was able to help bridge the gap between creating these stories and understanding that he's just having a busy day.
That's beautiful. My next question is, how can we forgive our parents while still holding space for our pain or own trauma? You just beautifully described it. So the framework that you used is being able to step into his shoes and look at it from his perspective, right? And you see, you going back and forth. You have your own perspective, and the old narrative, the old meaning was like, oh, he doesn't give me my time. I don't know what as for you, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. Like, he doesn't care about me. He's so busy, and you know, whatever that old story was. But the new story, because now you step in his shoes, well, you know, he runs a dealership. He's so busy. He's a salesperson. It's not that he's purposely ignoring you. Maybe he's trying to make ends meet. But the good news is you promise he'll call you back, and he does. And that's what it matters.
100%. And then sometimes I think it's also, I had to have a little bit of persistence, because again, he's on the older side. So a couple of times it would be the case where I would call him. He'd say, I'd call you back, and then he would just forget about it. So I would give him a couple of days and just give him another call, see if it's better. And then eventually we were able to kind of get into a routine of when we talk. And it ended up helping us kind of have these conversations that are more deep, but we actually are able to kind of see the other person's eyes, so to speak, and then go from there. But it was definitely a lot of just realizing that the communication aspect was key. And then just, again, understanding that at his age, he's not likely to change the personality traits that might drive me crazy. So all I can do is adjust.
That's beautiful. We at Remarkable Parenting Academy, we talked about inner locus and outer locus. Like outer locus is the weather, the traffic, trying to control our kids, kind of try to control other people's behavior. How does that work?
It doesn't.
So what we can't control is our own inner locus, our own focus. So we got to master what that means is we got to master our own world. I'm actually curious, how come your dad never asked you to go work for him? Everything he talked about is a hallmark of being a salesperson. You know, the follow-up, the persistence, the customer service, the care, the loving. If I was your dad, like, honey, you should come work for me.
He's very much the one person I know that does not prefer to work with family. And so to speak, now he's actually in insurance, funny enough. So he ended up taking after my kind of reign, though we are in totally different parts of the field. And so it ended up being kind of a dynamic where I had asked him, like, I'm surprised you don't have any of your kids working for you. And he was just like, not doing that. So I think it's also just for him having that work is work time, family time is family time. I know that Tony talks a lot about integrating work and life and family, but for him, he likes to have everything compartmentalized.
Until then, live purposely, love passionately, and be the most remarkable parent that you can be. We'll see you future episodes.